This video is going to discuss distance, rate, and time problems. And so we will use the formula distance equals rate times time, and we'll use it in different ways. Sometimes we may solve for distance, sometimes we may solve for rate, which would be distance divided by time, or sometimes we may solve for time, which would be distance divided by rate. So with that equation, we will kind of set up a sketch of just how we can organize our values in kind of a table format. So in this case, I've got the lazy river, and it has a current of 2 miles per hour, and the motorboat can travel 15 miles down the river. So what I've got here is I've got my distance, got my rate, I'm going to have my time. So when I say downriver, that just means you're going with the current. When I say up the river, that means that you're going against the current. So this is saying that a motorboat can travel 15 miles downriver. So we'll call this downriver, we'll call this part upriver. So a motorboat can travel 15 miles downriver. That total distance for downriver is 15. Now the rate, we're not real certain, but we know that we have a current, and that current is just going to either go against us or with us. So if I'm going downriver, whatever my rate is, I'm going to add 2 miles per hour to it because that's what the current would be. But it says it would go in the same amount of time. So I would have some sort of time down and up would be the same. And then I can go 9 miles upriver, and whatever I figure out the rate would be if I took 2 away from it, because that's what that 2 miles per hour current's going against it. So what I have is a distance equals rate times time. Here I've got a distance equals rate times time. The one thing I don't know is the time. So time would be represented as distance divided by rate, and time would be distance divided by rate. So let's come down here, and I would say downriver would be 15 divided by r plus 2. And the upriver would be 9 divided by r minus 2. That represents the time for upriver. That represents the time for downriver. And what I have is a proportion. So I could do cross products here, and I get 15 times r minus 2 is equal to 9 times r plus 2. So I want to distribute, and that's going to give me 15r minus 30 equals 9r plus 18. And I'm just going to subtract 9r, and I'm going to add 30. So I get 48 is equal to, what's that, 6r, so r has to be 8. Now what does that mean? What does the 8 mean? 8 is the speed of the boat, because it says has a current of 2 miles an hour and a motorboat can travel. I just need to find out what the speed of the boat would be. So the speed of the boat's actually 8. And we can come over here and we can check all this, and we could say that 15 divided by 8 plus 2 is 10, and 9 divided by 8 minus 2 is 6, and 9/6 and 15/10 are equivalent. They're both equal to 1.5. So since they both equal and they both check, this 8 miles an hour for the boat is correct. So take the same type of problem, organize it the same way. Two friends leave a hotel, so I'm going to have distance, rate, time. They leave the hotel at the same time, traveling in opposite directions. They travel for 4 hours each. All right, so this would be Susan. This would be Joan. Joan travels for 4 hours. Susan travels for 4 hours. Susan travels 10 miles an hour faster. So whatever her rate is, let's add 10 to it. Joan, we don't know what her rate would be. However, we know that she did travel some distance if we knew rate, and she traveled some distance, but we know that total was 480. So the distance here, so basically you're going to have Susan plus Joan is going to be the total distance. So Susan's distance is the rate times time. Joan is rate times time, and all of that equals 480. So I'm going to distribute. I'm going to get 4R plus 40 plus 4R equals 480. And so that will give me 8R plus 40 is equal to 480, and divide or subtract 40, and I'm going to get 8R is equal to 440. So divide by 8, R is equal to 55. That is what Joan's speed. So if Joan's speed is 55 miles an hour, then Susan is 10 miles an hour faster than that. And you can go ahead and check. You could take 55 times 4 and 65 times 4 and add those two distances together, and you should get 480. Number 3, set up in the same way with our organization. So I'm going to have distance, rate, and time. A boat travels for 3 hours with a current and returns the same distance against the current. So we got with the current, and against the current. If I go with the current, I know I'm going to go some distance. I'm just not sure what that distance is. And against the current, some distance. But a boat travels for 3 hours with a current. So with the current, that boat's traveling 3. And the speed is something plus 3 if you're with the current, because the current's a 3 mile an hour advantage. And then against the current would be a rate take away 3, and it took longer because you're going against the current. So if I want to solve for what's the boat's speed, then I need to solve for R. So that means the distance is equal to rate times time. This distance is equal to rate times time. So I want to find out what the speed. So it would be 3 times R plus 3 is equal to 4 times R minus 3. So this would be 3R plus 9 is equal to 4R minus 12. And if I subtract 3r, and I subtract, and I add 12, then I'm going to get 3 as my rate. So if I go back and substitute in, I get 3 I'm sorry, that's not 3, that's 21. $21 is the rate. So when I substitute back here, I get 21 plus 3 is equal to 24. And that number multiplied by 3. And 21 minus 3 is 18. And 18 times 4, both should produce the same distance. And here I've got 2 items, a bus. I have a bus and a car. Set up my table. So distance, rate, time. I've got a bus and a car. So a bus leaves traveling north at an average rate of 63 miles an hour. And at the same time, the car leaves Valdosta at 72 miles an hour. What time will they be 675 miles apart? So that just means that the distance, total distance, is equal to the bus rate and time plus the car rate and time. So that's going to be 135t is equal to 675. And we would just divide both sides by 135. And I'm going to get t is equal to, I'm going to get t is equal to 5. 5 what? Well, we're talking 5 hours. So if you took 63 times 5 and 72 times 5, that should give you a total of 675. So 63 times 5 is 315. And 72 times 5 would be 360. So if we took 315 and 360 and added those together, we would get 675. And one more example for this part 1 of this video, and there'll be a second part following with 5 more examples. So here I've got Natalie rode her bike. So we're going to look at different trips. First trip, part 1 trip, part 2 trip. So we'll say distance, rate, time, and we'll look at first part, and we'll look at the second part of her trip. The first part of her trip, she rode her bike 16 miles. Second part, she rode it for 42 miles. Her average speed during the second part of the trip was 6 miles an hour faster than her speed on the first part. Find her average speed for the second part of the trip. Well, in regard to time, if the total trip time was 5 hours. So what we have is a 5-hour total. So we would have, first part of the trip is distance divided by rate plus the second part of the trip would be 42, or distance divided by rate, and all of that's going to equal the 5 hours. So in this case, we need an LCM, and that LCM is going to be R times R plus 6, and we're just going to multiply all that together. So the R's will divide out, leaving me with 16 times R plus 6 plus this term, R plus 6 expression cancels out, so you're left with 42R. And then here, I'm going to take 5 times R, and then got to multiply that by R plus 6. So I'm going to get 5R squared plus 30R. And I'm going to get 16R plus 96 R plus, oh, excuse me, that's not an R, so it'd be 96 plus 42R. So these would combine and give me 58R plus 96 is equal to 5R squared plus 30R. So I'm just going to move everything to the right side. So 0 is equal to 5R squared minus 28R minus 96. So if you're looking for factors, you could do A times C and do 5 times 96, and that's going to be 480. It'll be negative. You're looking for factors that multiply to give you negative 480, and add to give you negative 28. And that would be negative 40 and 12. So we would have 5R squared minus 40R plus 12R minus 96. And we would group and factor. So 5R, that'd be R minus 8. And that's a 12, and 12 does divide 96. 8 times. So what I have is 5R plus 12 is equal to 0. And R minus 8 is equal to 0. And that's the only one that's going to give me a positive value. And we're talking about rate. Rate's not going to be negative. So if you substitute back in, 16 divided by 8 is 2 hours. And 42 divided by, well, that's 8 plus 6. So what you have is 16 divided by 8. And 42 divided by 14. Well, this is 2, and this is 3, which gives you the total of 5 hours.